Welcome to the New Books Network.
Following the atrocities, the brutal torture and murder of Israeli civilians, and the kidnapping of at least 200 hostages by Hamas on October 7th, Israel mounted a massive military response. We are in a shifting, dangerous historical moment. There are few better equipped to help us navigate through the web of Middle Eastern geopolitics than today's guest, Itamar Rabinovich, author of Middle Eastern Maze, Israel, the Arabs, and the Region. In this update to his earlier work, The Lingering Conflict, published by Brookings in 2012, Rabinovich delves deeper and informs readers on the recent twists and turns of the Middle East conflict. With a storied career as both an academic historian and a diplomat, notably Israel's ambassador to the U.S. and a peace negotiator with Syria, Rabinovich brings a unique blend of scholarly rigor and real-world experience. This allows him to discuss Arab-Israeli dynamics not just as an independent issue, but also within the broader canvas of Middle Eastern regional and international politics. Welcome to the Van Leer Institute series on ideas. I'm Renee Garfinkel, and I'm honored to welcome Ambassador Itamar Rabinovich to the show today. Ambassador Rabinovich, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you, Renee. Pleasure to be with you and always with the Van Leer Institute that I have always appreciated highly.
Mr. Ambassador, the situation in the Middle East today is more fluid and more dangerous than it's been in a very long time. You've documented the history of the Arab-Israeli conflict since 1948. How do you think the understanding or misunderstanding of this history has shaped the present dynamics in the region?
Well, one important thing to realize and understand is that it is no longer just the Arab-Israeli conflict, and now there is an Iranian-Israeli conflict, which is far more dangerous than the Arab-Israeli conflict. The Arab-Israeli conflict is in a paradoxical state because in one way, it's petering out. Arab states have come to quite a few of them, came to the conclusion that they have given 70 years or so to the Palestinian cause, that enough is enough, that they have their own interests to follow, and have been reconciling or making peace with Israel or disengaging from the conflict. At the same time, the Palestinian issue is with us. Yes, you have on the ground a practically equal number of Palestinians and Jews west of the Jordan. We have the West Bank, we have Israeli Arab Palestinian population of nearly 2 million, and there is Gaza, which was always there as the most intractable component of the Palestinian problem. So this is a complex situation. As part of the Arab-Israeli conflict mounting a positive track, and the other part of it remaining on a very dangerous path, but overshadowed by the Iranian threat. Iran is not just another Middle Eastern country. It's a large, powerful country, almost 90 million people, rich with oil, sophisticated elite, armed forces, and the zeal of a revolutionary regime that has not lost its zeal since 1979, and with, I would say, diabolical hatred of the state of Israel and a genuine desire to destroy it. And Iran has been very successful in encircling Israel with a direct and indirect presence in Lebanon, in Syria, and in Gaza. And what we saw on the 7th of October was something that resulted, at least in part, from Iranian support, help, and inspiration, and what should have been in the original Iranian script, Hezbollah's attack on the northern Galilee.
Yes, and it is widely believed that Iran was actively behind the Hamas massacre. So, given Iranian irrational and extreme hatred for Jews in Israel. And given its nuclear ambitions and its positioning in the larger regional politics, how do you view its relationship with Israel and its influence on the Arab-Israeli dynamics going forward? What measures or strategies do you think are necessary to effectively address the Iranian nuclear challenge?
Okay, first of all, as long as this regime is in power in Iran, there is no hope of improving or moderating the Israeli-Iranian relationship. I mean, there is a genuine hatred and, a religiously based belief that victory is on their side. Second, the nuclear issue. Iran, we have to admit it, is now a nuclear threshold country. It's not far from being able to build a bomb. They have yet to go a certain distance in order to arm a missile or create other ways of delivering nuclear weapons, but they are there. They may not make the deliberate, explicit choice to go fully nuclear. They may prefer to stay where they are now. But Iran, being a nuclear threshold country, is dangerous enough. Second, all international efforts to stop this and all Israeli efforts to stop this failed. I mean, there they are. Three, for now, for the first time, an important Arab country, Saudi Arabia, came out in an interview given by Crown Prince MBS Mohammed bin Salman to Fox News. For the first time, there was an explicit statement on the Iranian nuclear by a Saudi ruler, de facto, who said, if they have it, we will have it. It's too dangerous for us. So the problem has been put on the world's desk or agenda, as it were, because if Iran is practically nuclear and Saudi Arabia is going nuclear, if both of them do that, Turkey and Egypt will not stay far behind, and to have a fully nuclearized Middle East would be a real powder keg. And the world has to cope with that. Not easy. The United States is not in a position to dictate. The Russians, the Chinese are not cooperative. The West Europeans are always more timid. So that's a major challenge for us, for the Middle East, and for the world.
Yes, it is. We're already a powder keg. But let's talk about America. Along with revulsion and horror at Hamas's sadistic terror rampage against Israelis, the Biden administration expressed its strongest support for Israeli self-defense. Let's step back and take a longer view of American foreign policy in the region. How do you evaluate the evolution of U.S. policy from the Trump to the Biden administrations? And in what ways did these changes influence the region and Israel's strategic position?
Yeah, with your permission, I'll go back one administration and begin with Obama.
Okay.
Obama wanted to use the American expression pivot out of the region.
Right.
He felt that he and members of his administration, and let's remember that President Biden was his vice president, felt that the United States was too heavily invested in the region, too long, costly, and useless wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, and that the real challenge to America was in the Asia-Pacific region with rising China, and therefore the United States had to reduce its direct involvement in the Middle East and to invest more time, effort, resources in the Asia-Pacific region. This was both a policy and a perception of this policy in the region. Came President Trump with a very mixed bag. I mean, on the one hand, he was an isolationist more than Obama. He disengaged from a number of international commitments and in many respects was an isolationist. But he was interested in the Middle East. He had a relationship with the Saudi ruling house, with the Emirati ruling house, combining business and policy. When I say business, it's also personal or family business. He wanted very much to broker an Israeli-Palestinian deal. He was the author, or at least the reputed author, of a book called The Art of the Deal, and he wanted probably a Nobel Prize for fixing the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, and he invested an effort in that in a peculiar way, but he did. But in other respects, let's say with regard to Syria, with regard to Iraq, he wanted to disengage, and it was a very peculiar policy. In a complex way that we may not have the time to get into, from his effort through a team of 3 Jewish members, 2 of them very hawkish, to draw an Israeli-Palestinian final status agreement, the unintended consequence became the Abraham Accords. And to his credit, President Biden used his influence, used American resources to make some of these agreements happen. Let's say the Israeli-Moroccan deal would not have happened but for the recognition of their position in the Sahara, or the Sudanese deal, such as it is. He invested efforts, and he deserves credit for that. And then comes in President Biden. Again, he would like to continue, in principle, the policy of Obama, of pivoting away from the Middle East. His effort is on China, and of course, the Russian invasion of Ukraine revives the Cold War in Europe. These are very important issues. He determined not to invest a major effort in trying to resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. He was burned like other members of the Obama administration. And with regard to Saudi Arabia, he's hostile. And then, of course, the brutal assassination of the American Saudi journalist Khashoggi in Istanbul led him to denounce the Saudi Crown Prince. And that created a very negative phase in the relationship between the Biden administration and Saudi Arabia. More recently, and particularly given the Chinese role in brokering reconciliation between Saudi Arabia and Iran, he and his administration became determined to fix the American-Saudi relationship. 3 major issues on the table there, including a defense pact. In order to get the defense pact through Congress, he needs AIPAC and Israeli support, and he therefore moderated his criticism of Netanyahu's government and its judicial overall, so-called. And finally, in September, he met with Netanyahu, an okay meeting. And the issue on the table was trying to broker this trilateral deal, American, Saudi, Israeli. And I believe, I don't have evidence, but I believe that the timing of the October 7 attack was, among other things, meant to disrupt this rapprochement that the Iranians definitely do not want to see.
And do you think it will succeed? That it has succeeded in making that tripartite agreement dead?
No, postponing it. And it was not fully alive before, because in addition to the difficulties of getting it through Congress, there was the Israeli-Palestinian dimension. There was a Saudi demand and an American demand that Israel carry out a series of gestures, at least, vis-à-vis the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. I'm not familiar with all the details here, but not a 2-state solution, but something beyond hollow statements. I'm not sure that Netanyahu would have wanted or would have been able to get it through his coalition, or that he would have been willing to lose his coalition in an effort to become the peacemaker with Saudi Arabia. These were all issues up in the air. So now it is frozen, it is not dead, and the ability to revive it will depend on the events of the coming weeks and months that, of course, we have yet to wait for.
Okay, let's move around the region a little bit and take a look at Syria. With your experience as a peace negotiator with Syria, how do you interpret the long-term effects of the Syrian civil war on Israel's northern front? And as a follow-up to that, Russia's role. Russia has been militarily involved in Syria and has become a player in this region. And how does that affect Israel's strategy and Russian-Israel relations unfolding?
Yeah, let's begin with this final point. Unfortunately, what used to be a reasonably good relationship between Israel and post-Soviet Russia has now become negative. The way Putin acts, the way he speaks, the way anti-Semitism is evident in so many places in Russia is a bad development, but there it is. Now, and of course we have Russia as a neighbor in Syria. What has happened in Syria is that the civil war ended not with a victory, but by Bashar al-Assad, but by Bashar al-Assad managing to remain in power, with and after major military support by Russia and Iran, and a variety of Shiite militias, including Hezbollah. But he is not really in control of Syria. He's in control of about 60% of Syria. About 40% of Syria is not under state control. And even in the areas under state control, he's not in full control. There is the Russian presence, the Iranian presence, Shiite militias, and also the Assad family became overtly a mafia family. I mean, one of the major branches of the Syrian economy now is a state-sponsored drug industry and trade. So Syria itself is not a military threat to Israel. The Syrian army is still not in shape, but there is Russian military presence, more in terms of ground-to-air missile batteries, but there they are. And the Iranian effort to build military infrastructure and a missile system in Syria in parallel to what they have already built in Lebanon. In Lebanon, they have a massive arsenal of rockets and missiles in the hands of Hezbollah under their overall responsibility, but in the hands of Hezbollah. What they tried to do in Syria was to build a system completely owned and operated by them. And Israel has been trying to disrupt this and to destroy this effort. This is what we called for several years the war between the wars, the Israeli offensive against Iran. Iranians have not effectively responded, so we thought, to Israeli attacks in Syria, to Israeli attacks or assassinations of individual scientists and other malfeasant elements, but they have now responded, and very effectively and painfully so, through the Hamas attack on October 7th.
Hamas is often compared to ISIS, another cruel and brutal terror group with similar ideology about creating a caliphate in the whole world. And the rise and the fall of Islamic State was a tumultuous period in the Middle East. How has this impacted Israel's security concerns and its relationships with its neighbors?
Yeah, Hamas began and still, to a great extent, is the Palestinian branch of the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood. It did not begin, at least, as a jihadi organization like ISIS, but as a fundamentalist Muslim organization. But it has radicalized in the meantime, to some extent, under Iranian influence. And of course, what we saw on October 7 were ISIS-like behavior, beheadings and all that. And it is what it is now. And of course, even if we manage to get them out of the Gaza Strip, the elements of the organization will remain in Middle Eastern countries. They are in Qatar, they are in Turkey, they are in other places, and maybe it will go international like ISIS. The caliphate is destroyed, but ISIS is not, and there are always signs of ISIS trying to resurge. So I think Hamas will also join this category of an organization that will have been dealt a major blow, but will not have been fully eliminated.
And is that why Egypt is so reluctant to let Gazan civilians take refuge there during this fighting?
These two, but mostly, Egypt has its own problems. It's a country of 100 million people that it can barely feed. It is not interested in a Palestinian refugee population. And I think, as the President Sisi also explained quite frankly, he said if we host these Palestinians, there would be Hamas elements. They will attack Israel from Sinai. Israel will retaliate and will spoil our relationship with Israel. So he's simply not interested.
Nor apparently are any of the other Arab neighbors in the region.
No, I think the only viable option, if we do not want to stay in Gaza, which I think we do not, would be to have the Palestinian Authority come back. They were expelled in 2007. They themselves are not in the greatest of shapes, and they are on the eve of a succession crisis, and they will not. They will not want to take Gaza directly from Israel, as they use the term. We will not come back to Gaza on Israeli bayonets, but there can be arrangements for an interim force, international or regional, to take over the Gaza Strip and hand it over to the Palestinian Authority later on. It's the only solution I can envisage where someone takes Gaza from our hands, or off our hands.
Do you think they want to? After their experience?
I think they want it because, they do want, at the end of the day, to have a Palestinian state in the West Bank and Gaza. They cannot have it in the West Bank, but they definitely want Gaza as part of their entity and not what I call a three-state solution.
Yeah, right. And let's not forget about Turkey. Turkey has undergone significant political and strategic shifts in the past 20 years or so. And talk about its current role in the Middle East, especially in relation to Israel, and also as the country in between the Middle East and Europe.
Yeah, Turkey, not just between the Middle East and Europe. Turkey is almost between everything and everything. It probably has the best geopolitical location that you can think of. It is on the Mediterranean, it's on the Black Sea, it's the bridge between Asia and Europe. It has extensions into the Caucasus and Central Asia. There are Turkic peoples in this region. They are involved with Azerbaijan against Armenia. And they have all these Turkish-speaking post-Soviet republics in Central Asia. For many years, the legacy of Ataturk, the founder of the Turkish Republic, was a vision of Turkey being part of Europe, but they've been rebuffed. And Erdogan's vision is twofold. One is an Islamist, and secondly, he wants to revive Turkish glory. And if it cannot be in Europe, then let it be in its immediate environment in the Middle East. And Turkey is active in Syria, in Libya, in Yemen, in Somalia. It wants to be a hub for Middle Eastern gas or Mediterranean gas going to Europe. It's a very ambitious country. It's a country with significant capabilities. I mean, from the civilian point of view, let's just look at the airline. Very impressive. One of the world's largest and most effective airlines. They've been able to do that. They're a very large contracting company. They built Ben Gurion Airport. It's a country with capability, and yet much of it is an Islamist country. Much of the countryside is very conservative and planted in the past. And Erdogan himself, as I said, he's an Islamist ruler. His ideology is close to that of the Muslim Brotherhood. He is therefore close to Qatar and Hamas. He's not a friend of Israel. But in recent years, since he wants to improve his position in Washington, to normalize their position, he understands that an improvement of relations with Israel is part of that, and the relationship has been improved. It is still not free of tensions. I would not advise Israel to count on Turkey. You must have seen that there is a strict warning against Israelis going to Turkey because it may be full of Iranian-inspired terrorists looking to abduct or to hurt Israelis. So it's a problematic actor, but look at and that's a point I do make in the book. The Middle East has been transformed by the fact that Iran and Turkey are now full participants in Middle Eastern politics. So these are two very large countries, together almost 200 million people, powerful, developed, and the three strongest military powers in the region are not Arab. They are Turkey, Iran, and Israel. It's a different Middle East.
And Iran and Turkey, like Russia, all have expansionist dreams. Does that factor into what's happening?
Yeah. I don't. Turkey only wants some territory in Syria. It took over a significant strip along the Turkish-Syrian border. Its main concern there is Kurdish. Turkey has a very large Kurdish minority of about 20%. The Turks are afraid that it may become secessionist. And there are two large Kurdish concentrations in northern Iraq and in northern Syria. And the Turks somehow have a working relationship with the Kurds in Iraq, but not with the ones in Syria. And their de facto annexation of a significant strip in Syria is meant directly to create a buffer against the Syrian Kurds.
And what about Israel's internal politics? Israel experienced a great deal of political instability in recent years, more so this year, but actually in the past 4 or 5 years. How has this internal political crisis influenced its foreign policy? And where do you see Israeli politics changing going forward?
Okay, I'll put it directly. I'm a strong critic of the current government. I think it's the worst government we ever had, including extremist elements. And if you or any of our listeners Google's something called Bezalel Smotrich's decision plan of 2017, it's on the internet. You'll find an explicit plan to annex the West Bank and create here a one state. I think it always was a folly, but given the events of the last 10 days, one must understand how foolish it is. So to have a government with such elements is a problem. Secondly, the whole unexplainable drive for judicial overhaul in the face of these mounting dangers. Remember that the chief of staff wanted to meet with the prime minister on the eve of a vote in the Knesset on the so-called reasonableness issue. The prime minister refused to see him. He wanted to warn him about the imminent dangers, not specifically about the attack in Gaza, but about this imminent danger of Hezbollah and Hamas joining up in a forefront attack on Israel. So, I think there will be, of course, now we're in wartime, and the war must first be completed, and we must have a unity of purpose. When this is over, there will have to be soul searching and reckoning on all levels: the military, the intelligence community, and the political level. So, I must say the military and the leaders of the intelligence community were more forthright than the politicians by taking responsibility. Another element in impact on foreign policy was this peculiar relationship with other non-liberal democracies, Poland, Hungary. There is what I call a right-wing international with Steve Bannon in America, the Hungarians, the Poles, other semi-authoritarian or fully authoritarian countries, and unfortunately, parts of the Israeli government joined this coalition. This is something that we should put an end to. We want to be a liberal democracy, fully planted in the West, and I hope that the huge tragedy that we went through will help us pull ourselves together. Now, I'd like to emphasize the importance of leadership. Israel is not the only fragmented society around the globe. There are quite a few. And what enables fragmented societies to live together is leadership that broadcasts and foments unity. And whoever becomes our leader in the years to come will have to make this a very high priority, to unite rather than to divide.
Absolutely right. That's essential. on a personal level, having served both as an academic historian and in diplomatic capacities, how have you balanced the scholarly need for objectivity with the very real and personal experiences of diplomacy and negotiation?
Um, I think one of the popes, I don't remember which one, I think was also or maybe a bishop in the Middle Ages, was also an astronomer. And he was asked, how do you reconcile your Catholicism with your being an astronomer? So he said, when I look at the sky, I'm not a Catholic, and when I go to church, I don't look at the stars. So, of course, in many respects, diplomatic work, conduct of foreign policy, can rely in a big way on academic expertise. Some great policymakers, Kissinger, Albright, others, were originally academics and brought to bear a knowledge of history, international relations, on the conduct of the policy. But at the same time, in the art of diplomacy, of getting people together, of negotiating, of making things happen, you have to exercise other qualities. You have to be smart, manipulative. You need to be able to be sensitive to people, to read their character, and this doesn't always sit together with academic values. And you have to do what you have to do, but you have to always be true to yourself. Let me give I think a recent example. There was a question of this horrid effort and saddle us with responsibility for what happened in that Palestinian hospital in Gaza. It took the Israeli system about 12 hours to come out with a strong version, well documented, that this was not us, that this was an abortive missile by Islamic Jihad. And there were people who complained, why didn't you do it right away? The answer, I think the correct one, was that your credibility is sometimes more important than your immediate impact. And that is correct. So when you are a diplomat and you are also an academic and you write books, in the conduct of your diplomacy, your honesty and credibility must always remain intact.
That's a good example. Because it's true, there were a lot of complaints, and of course, Israel lost the narrative to Hamas, who has no such constraints and can say whatever they want, and it gets picked up.
Yeah, but also, I mean, they were quick to do it, but there were also too many Western media outlets that were eager to seize on it and immediately blame us. What I call the BBC syndrome.
You're correct. And even after Israel very clearly documented it and had a very good press conference, and many Western news outlets aired the whole thing, still some report it as two sides. They say this and they say that, which, sometimes there are no two sides.
As the late Bernard Lewis used to say, being even-handed means that you have two left hands.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Well, finally, Mr. Ambassador, with the shifting geopolitical dynamics, evolving threats, and new alliances, what's your big vision for the Middle East in the next decade? Where do you see the most promise, and where lie the most significant challenges?
Due to the Abraham Accords, I've been going quite often to the Gulf, and I'm impressed by what I see there. Yes, you have to remember that in the Emirates, 10% are citizens and 90% are guest workers. But the 10% are impressive, and the ruling elite is impressive, and the place is neat, orderly, effective, very impressive ruling elite. And I think what we have seen in recent decades is so much has shifted in the Arab world from the war-torn and divided Levant, Egypt, to the Gulf region. And I think the Gulf will continue to play a more and more important role in the Middle East. The other parts of the Middle East that are fully disrupted, failed states, and all that, Iraq, Syria, Libya, will continue to pull the region down, and the region will need external help in order at least to hang together and not to sink.
Thanks so much for talking with me today, Ambassador Rabinovich.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I enjoyed our conversation.
And thanks to our researcher, Bela Pasikov.